When you invest, you expect a return. When you invest in a Clemson education, the return comes in people whose lives are changed by better jobs and brighter futures. Education inspires a young woman to become a mentor. It grows a guardian for our food supply and turns learners into teachers. No investment delivers lasting returns like education, and Clemson delivers one of the country's highest returns in dollars, graduates, and the lives of the South Carolinians it touches.
Hey, welcome to the Post and Courier's second Inside Business Live. Appreciate you all making it out this morning to talk about this vital topic. I think it's something that all of us are dealing with in this region and in this state, whether you're slinging newspapers like the Post and Courier or building airplanes. I think the workforce issue is something we're all grappling with, and we're excited for the panel that we have here today to talk about the many ways we're all adjusting and making changes. So, but I'm here first to introduce our sponsor of this event, which is Clemson University, and Mark Land, who is the, I'll get this title right, Mark, the VP of University Relations for Clemson University. And he's going to talk with us a little bit about the role that Clemson plays in helping businesses across the state deal with issues like these and others. So if everybody could welcome Mark, he's going to come up and help us a little bit today.
Thank you, Mitch. I believe we have a short video. I promised people no PowerPoints at 8 o'clock in the morning, so we're going to start with something a little light, and then I'm going to get out of the way here pretty quickly.
When you invest, you expect a return. When you invest in a Clemson education, the return comes in people whose lives are changed by better jobs and brighter futures. Education inspires a young woman to become a mentor. It grows a guardian for our food supply and turns learners into teachers. No investment delivers lasting returns like education, and Clemson delivers one of the country's highest returns in dollars, graduates, and the lives of the South Carolinians it touches.
First of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Mitch, and thanks to all of our friends at the Post and Courier who have become very good partners with us over the last several months and do incredibly important work in this region. As a former newspaper editor and who still has ink in his veins, you know, I know just how lucky you all are to have a strong local press, and the folks at the Post and Courier do it as well as, certainly as well as anybody in the state, and one of the very best that I've ever worked with in the region. So I think you're fortunate to have such strong partners. I'm delighted to be here this morning to represent Clemson, and as an institution, we're delighted to be a sponsor for today's event. You know, anything that brings together members of this really booming business community, you know, makes sense for us for a couple of reasons. First is, and I'm going to speak for just a couple of minutes, like any good warm-up act. I know that the key is to be short and sweet, so I'm going to say just a few things, and I'm going to turn it over to the panel. But you know, being a sponsor today is important for us for a couple of reasons. First is that even though you all are just about as far away as you can get from us and still be in the state of South Carolina, Charleston and the Low Country is really important, is an important part of Clemson's success. Last year alone, you may not know, we had about 2,000 students from the Low Country who made their way up to Clemson to study. That's 27% more than just 5 years ago. And if you look at just Wando High School, over the last 5 years, we've had 500 students from Wando enroll at Clemson, which makes it one of our real go-to high schools in the state of South Carolina for attracting top students. And they're not alone. We do very well with a number of other high schools in this area. You know, at the same time, not only do we love your students, we love the presence that we are building down here in Charleston. 20 years ago, we started offering architecture classes in the city. And for a long time, even before that, we've had a presence through our cooperative extensions that you may have taken advantage of some of their programming. But today, that academic footprint has grown. We have over 200,000 square feet of research and academic space in the area through at the Cigar Factory building here in the city, and in North Charleston as well at our North Charleston campus, which is home to our SCE&G Energy Innovation Center, and our newest academic building, which is the wonderful Zucker Family Education Center, which we opened in 2016. In addition to architecture, we offer courses in engineering and digital production arts in the area. We also have partnerships with MUSC, where we offer bioengineering, and historic preservation, which we offer in collaboration with our friends at the College of Charleston. A lot of this programming is at the graduate level, and a lot of it is designed to meet the needs of Charleston's business community. And that brings me to actually the second and maybe even most important reason for us to be here today, is that this topic is really near and dear to our hearts. We were founded 130 years ago as a science and agriculture school dedicated to supporting the needs of South Carolina residents, specifically to help build and maintain a strong economy. So 130 years later, that has not changed. That is still central to our mission. And the way that mission plays itself out in the 21st century largely revolves around our ability to engage with business leaders in leading industries across the state of South Carolina. We engage every day with a lot of the state's largest employers, including many that are household names in this region. And we hear one thing over and over and over again: we need your students. Matter of fact, in some of the fields that are more science and tech focused, we've had employers repeatedly tell us they'll hire every engineer, every computer scientist, every bioengineer that we can give them. Does that sound familiar? Anybody who's actually looking for good employees? You know, but as challenges go, attracting and retaining talented workers, enough talented workers to keep up with what is really a booming economy, especially down here, I mean, that's a challenge. It's preferable to the alternative, though, right? But it's still a challenge. And if we're going to meet the challenge, it's going to take everyone working together to find innovative ways to produce as many talented workers as possible, but workers who have the skills that match the needs of the workforce in this region. And once we attract them, it's not enough to get them here. And you all are in a sweet spot in terms of, you know, retaining folks from the perspective of having a great place for people to live. But, you know, it's not enough just to attract. We have to retain, and we've got to entice people to stay by ensuring that our communities are great places to live, work, and to raise families. Helping South Carolina become better has been part of our mission for, like I said, for 130 years. Events like this one, where we get a bunch of really smart people, put them together in a room, hear from some more smart people, you know, who have a shared vision for what, you know, how to make this area better tomorrow than it is today, are really important to keep the momentum going and to keep the conversation moving along. So with that, I'll just say thank you for letting us be a small part of the conversation today, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, I'm John McDermott. I'm the business editor of the Post and Courier, and with me co-moderating is Thad Moore. He's a reporter who covers the labor scene, among other topics. I'd like to thank our panel for being here. I'd like to introduce them. From my far left, it's Akeem Amon Jones, who's the HR site leader at Boeing, South Carolina, one of our largest private employers. Claire Gibbons, who's Director of Global Marketing and Communications for the Charleston Regional Development Alliance. If you're not familiar with them, they market our region to future employers. We have Rodney Berry, who's Director of Economic Development for Congressman Tom Rice, and Stephanie Mangini, who's Senior Manager of Corporate Communications for Volvo Car US, which is, of course, getting ready to start operations up in Berkeley County. It's definitely a seller's market out there. So we don't need to belabor the point, but I'd like to hope maybe throw a couple broad questions out there for the entire panel and then home in on a couple of individuals' questions. Maybe start with what does the talent situation look like from each of your vantage points, and what are some of the major impediments to finding and retaining employees, and are we getting close to a breaking point here?
I'll start if you don't mind, because our situation may be a little bit different. Although I'm here on behalf of Congressman Rice, this district entails 8 counties in the PD and Horry County region, and you know I've watched Charleston for some time, and you guys, it looks like walked in the set of Southern Charm, y'all good-looking people, smart folks. We had Myrtle Beach Manor, and I think you stole our slot. I never watched that. It's been a struggle in our area for some time. We're rural for the most part. Our most booming city would be Florence, which is doing quite well, and then Myrtle Beach, which is predominantly tourism of that nature. But for the most part, we're made of rural South Carolina. And of course, one of the challenges there, we do have an education component. We've got 2 technical schools that serve our area that do a fantastic job, and if it wasn't for those folks, we probably would be in some trouble. But we've struggled, quite frankly. Lack of jobs, and certainly the talent follows the jobs as it pertains to that. But, and I don't want to get carried away with this, but we do have a shining light. Many of you know that keep up, and I've talked with several of you already, that we were the second inland port in South Carolina, located in Dillon County, which is a very rural county. It happens to be my home county. I left Congressman Rice for 2 years to go there to kind of facilitate that inland port. So we're very proud, and we think for the first time that we're going to step up on the totem pole. We had calls from prospective industries like I wasn't used to. It was quite fun to entertain those calls. But we do. Our workforce, one critical element is all of you know, is the quality of life. And in the rural South Carolina, there's just not a whole lot that we have to offer. We're spearheading initiatives right now for that type thing, more of the arts and things of that nature. Florence has done a great job. They just returned from the Municipal Association and won all kind of awards, really for the last 4 or 5 years for their involvement in creating the quality of life. So that may be very different than what the rest of the panelists are experiencing.
So just from a Volvo perspective, I think we are very blessed here in the Lowcountry. I think the talent base is here. I think it's up to us as industry, though, to help develop those talent. For us, I'll tell you, we've got 600 people in the queue ready to be interviewed when we're ready to go with our second shift. That's tremendous. That's more people than we need. So we're in a really great position. But, we've done a lot of work to develop that workforce. We've worked with the communities, we've worked with the state and local government to figure out how we do make job opportunities available for those who may not have manufacturing experience. And places like Trident Tech is offering a compressed curriculum to make that happen. And I'm, as I sit at Volvo, I'm always looking at the numbers of people who are taking this curriculum and coming on board. And when I hear stories from, a young mother who comes to me after our onboarding session and says, I took that lean manufacturing course. I didn't know that I had a future. I thought all I could do was drive a school bus. Driving a school bus is not a bad career option, but she said I wanted more. And this has afforded me the opportunity to do more. When you hear stories like that, that's a success story. That's what we in industry need to do to help build our workforce here.
I think for Boeing, I think you really set it up really nicely. The talent pool is here. I think what we have to do more is the readiness pool. There's a difference. For most of you who are familiar with talent management, you go through this exercise where you're saying, I've got a succession plan that reflects a slate of individuals, that's candidates, who are in the pool. But then when the opportunities open up, are they ready? And that's where the rubber meets the road. Majority of the time, they're not ready. And so really, in my opinion, and I think most of you would agree, sometimes the shortage is reflective of the quality versus the quantity. Sometimes we have this quantification of many talents, but then for the opportunity, that's not quite there. And I think that's where we have to do a better job of training and development in 2 perspectives. One, from the community in partnership with the universities. Personally speaking myself, I've allowed my connections with some of the local universities to be on their advisory boards around leadership development, because there's another piece of this too around the EQ skill in preparation for the corporate entity. To graduate with a degree, even the top of your class, does not necessarily mean you're ready to succeed in that space. And that mentorship, that apprenticeship. You know, we have a program, I think most of you are aware of it, and if you're not, new news for you, but we've got a Dream Learners program at the Boeing Company where we are trying to excite the students at a very young age so they can pursue an opportunity in working in aerospace. And a lot of times people think, oh my goodness, it's only engineering. Well, just so you know, it's a whole lot more than engineering. You know, when I tell people I work for an aerospace company, the first thing they say to me is, engineering? I said, nope, HR. And then they'll say, well, do you do recruiting? Nope. And they'll, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm actually on the business side of it. You know, I help the strategy and the operation. And they go, wow, I didn't even realize that existed in HR. So again, ensuring that folks understand what's available to them, because we actually have Volvo, Mercedes-Benz, and a lot of my peers sitting here, a large percentage of opportunities that can be available for students, but they oftentimes don't see themselves in that space. So we've got to do a better job of branding to ensure that they understand what that means.
Good morning, everybody. As John mentioned, I'm with the Economic Development Agency for the Charleston Metro, the Charleston Regional Development Alliance. I work with a lot of you here in the room, so thanks for being here today. Picking up of what my colleagues have said from Boeing and Volvo, labor and skilled workforce is the #1 issue for companies around the world. That's not unique to Charleston or South Carolina. And I think what they both have said more subtly is that we don't have a labor shortage issue. We have an alignment issue. You know, we are having steady growth for many years, and we're seeing that across the Southeast. Our population and labor force is growing 3 times faster than the U.S. and has for several years. We're adding 28 people a day. What the challenge has been, and what many people in this room and beyond have been working for several years, is how do we align the skills of our workforce with the jobs that are going to be here and be here for many years to come. And I would say that part of the branding is that, and in no offense to Clemson, a 4-year education for me growing up was the path. Now, there are many other paths that may not be a 4-year education. It may be 2 years. It could be your certificate, associates, apprenticeship programs. There are many different solutions to secure your economic future, and I think there's a challenge among parents and teachers. How do we spread that message that there are plenty of things going on? What I'm excited about in this community is how nimble I see public, private sector, academic leaders working together to affect this change, to look at where is it that we need to be globally competitive, and what are the things we need to do to get there. How many of you know that for the past 2 years, 30 new STEM degrees have been implemented or are planned to be implemented in our 3-county region? It's an amazing thing that business and education are doing to align. Clemson mentioned the Zucker Graduate Education Center. We also have here, adjacent to Trinity Tech's campus, an aeronautical training center that is under construction that will help our advanced manufacturing. In Berkeley County, there is, I'm not entirely sure the name is, but I think it's going to be the Tri-County Training Center, which will work to also support training for our automotive companies here. That's just a few of the things. From a state level, you have Ready SC, who has been one of the jewels in the crown of helping companies looking to locate here identify and pre-train potential employees. And I think in terms of where we're going and challenges of getting the workers that are here trained, companies, as Stephanie mentioned, are looking to be more flexible in terms of their requirements. So while we may not have a population that has a 1-year background in manufacturing, Through working with the state and the Lean Manufacturing Program, each of the counties, Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester, all of whom are represented here today, have been having public input meetings to get large numbers of potential workers into this program and then into the workforce. So I'm excited to see the pipeline and the things that have been happening, and I think the biggest challenge we have is that we need fuel to scale that. We need the ability to ramp that up because we're not growing enough of our own. We have to not just grow them, we have to retain them, and right now our biggest muscle is in attracting them. And that's not just for manufacturing, that's for software IT as well. But if you look at the biggest gaps in our community for what we grow of graduates versus the occupations, the 4 biggest gaps start with production occupations, then it's software IT, then hospitality, and then construction. And we see some of that as a reflection of coming out of the recession with construction in particular. Production and software IT happen to be the 2 of our industry sectors that are just growing exponentially, and we're not graduating enough, even with the new degrees, to be able to keep up with that. So we still have to attract. I also want to give a shout out to the Metro Chamber because they recently, and as covered in the Post and Courier, won a grant in partnership with the Eckerd Foundation to develop construction-related training career academy program here. So help is on the way to help buffet that area where we have gaps as well. So my advice is that we're doing the right things. We just need massive scale and fuel to continue doing more of that exponentially.
So I think, Claire, you just sort of addressed a lot of the ways that government is trying to push along this issue and sort of bridge the skills gap, I guess you could call it. I kind of wonder where does the line draw in terms of, what local governments and state government can really do versus where it sort of comes to be the private sector. Like where does the private sector role sort of come in? And I know that those sort of go in tandem, but I kind of wonder what's the outer reach of what I guess our local governments are capable of doing in this arena?
That's me.
Well, whoever wants to take it. You can start.
Great. So the question is, what can our local governments do to support?
And then where does the private sector come in on that? Yeah.
We need money. So the first thing you do when you look at local government is what can you do from a zoning, permitting, and financial support. I think looking at workforce training and education as an investment. It is an investment in economic development. There is a direct correlation with that. One of the great programs that Trinit Tech, some of the local manufacturers have been engaged in is apprenticeships, both youth and adult level. Adult apprenticeships have been around for, I think, 30 years in this community, but youth apprenticeship program is relatively new. And within the past 4 years, I think there have been 20, no, that's not right, maybe closer to 200 youth apprenticeships that come through that. If you're not familiar with that program, let me tell you about it. And then I'll get back around to answering. If you're a high school junior or senior, you're taking your normal classes. You also are going and getting classes at Trinit Tech. You're going to a local advanced manufacturer, be it Boeing, Bosch, hopefully in the future Volvo, and you're getting training on the job training. You're also getting paid. This program is subsidized, so there's very little out of pocket for the youth apprentices for it. So when you graduate, you're graduating with a high school degree, already college credit, skills training, money in your pocket, and most likely a job at that company that you have been apprenticing with. It is a phenomenal program, and roughly 200 students have come through that in the past 4 years. We need that to scale. And it's such an exciting program that the U.S. Department of Labor has come down here to find out Charleston's secret sauce, and they are piloting an apprenticeship program for engineers, which has never been done before. here. And if it works, it's going to become a national model for the rest of the country. So those kind of things I have a lot of pride about, because you see the value of a job. You see the ability to transform generations out of cycles of poverty into work, into skills. And I think that's what the folks in this room and beyond are doing. And so coming back to your question, what can private and what can legislators do? Support that, scale it, grow it, give it the fuel it needs to really transform the underemployed and those coming into our workforce to truly create a workforce pipeline.
Yeah, and so I would just add, I think Claire makes a really good point. I mean, that program is a partnership with the private and public, and it works really well. So, you know, my advice, if you're out in the industry, if you're in a company, partner with your local government, your county council, your state, your federal, because we have to have those conversations. I think workforce development is a huge topic for this area. I mean, everywhere I go, that's where the topic stops, right? I mean, that's what we're all talking about. But as industry, that collaboration is so important. And I think that, you know, our government here in South Carolina just has such an entrepreneurial spirit that if you knock on their door and say, hey, we need help, they say, let us figure out how we can partner together and start from the beginning. You know, put a plan together and see it through. I think that's an important process.
Yeah, so just to, to kind of add on to what was being said, from a government perspective, and I'm going to give you a little inside-out perspective, I don't think we've ever seen this kind of growth in this area, unlike anywhere else. It's really, truly a phenomenon. And I recall when I used to visit my sister who was in college up in Atlanta, what was going on there around the construction. Whenever you see mass construction, that means growth. And so as I think about what can we do specifically to attract and retain the talent that's here, for those of us who are in college, you know, we look around and there is an issue regarding infrastructure. So that's where the government can help us, to be very frank with you. And we partner with the government in this space to make sure that we're thinking through that. And then I think the other piece, too, that's really important for companies is to ensure that they have strong mentorship programs, which in the Boeing Company actually does extremely well, with the community where we serve. So in other words, it's not just about just hiring these folks, but how are you developing the pipeline that may not see themselves in the future there? And through that mentorship program, that is powerful. I have had the opportunity of meeting a lot of what we call our teammates who have shared with me, hey, you know, I got in here as a mechanic. And by the way, when you get them, make sure that they understand and know the benefits that are available to them, such as the training that we have and a very strong tuition reimbursement program, because we know that student debt is going to be the next fall, I hate to say it, of the next century. So how do you help individuals to see the art of the possibility of where they can go? That is powerful. Mm-hmm. And then I think internship is not enough in this state. When I think about how we tap into training the best of the best, yeah, they may have the educational achievement, but do they actually have the on-the-job training? And when I say it's not the best, sometimes we hire these interns and we give them, I call it the fa-la-la-la-la jobs. Like, seriously. It is not meaningful. It doesn't allow them to compete, nor does it allow them to stand out. A matter of fact, I'll be honest with you, I've had many mentees where I'll go into a room and I'll speak to them and I can pick up the ones who are potential leaders. And what I do is I have roundtable conversations with them. When they leave and they're going back to school, I stay connected with them. Before we have another internship program that starts, I make sure that they are vetted, ready for that. And then I hold our leaders accountable to ensure that they are doing jobs that brings value to the organization. Because the lack thereof, that's where your retention goes. And how do we pull up those who are kind of not represented around the diversity piece of it? That's a whole different ballgame to talk about. But I could, you know, we could spend all day talking about this. But I really believe in all honesty, the two things that we have is the government being very in partnership with us. And by the way, I also think that companies can actually utilize their executives on their site to be professors in classrooms. Yeah. I push that in the Boeing Company and help the universities, colleges, and the training programs to have the appropriate curriculum that makes them competitive, not just here, but should be in the world, globally, like you talked about. And so when you think about what can we do as a corporation, is to get involved. And by the way, money is not enough. While we understand a lot of money is being thrown on it, it's not enough. Because then when you talk about the global competition, they're not talking about money, they're talking about skill. So, my perspective.
Rodney, I was wondering if you could take, we've heard a lot about counties and states involved. How about the federal government?
Sure, and let me start. I cannot overstate the pivotal role that the private sector plays. Testament to that is I have been to some of Boeing's outreach, and to see all those kids out there excited and engaged, I would suggest to you, not only is it winning for you guys, but you know, everybody's not going to go to work at Boeing. So these kids get focused and excited about the future ahead. You know, mind you, I'm molded by my environment, right? And although I'm a very optimistic person, and we've got a lot of great things going specifically in our area, for years in rural South Carolina, we've looked to the government. And something, I don't mean to dumb it down, but what I've preached for years is, if you're at home and your grass is yay high, nobody's coming to cut your grass. You got to cut your own grass. So that's the pivotal role that the private sector plays. Now, the government role, yeah, oh, so very important. And when they walk in unison, it's a beautiful thing, and things really happen. On the federal level, I don't know if you know this. This was something that was just reauthorized. It was called the Perkins Act. It went into effect July 1st, and what this has done in the president's infrastructure bill, they've allotted over $1 billion to go back into the technical system. That just happened in July. So that funnels down, and we all know how important the technical colleges, what kind of role they play in our workforce. So that's something to be excited about, and that's something that you'll start seeing some things happen. And getting a little closer, something that the state did as well, and a lot of you certainly know about the Palmetto Promise, but this affected me again in rural South Carolina. But Abbeville County had a lawsuit against the state, and they won it. And what amounted to the lawsuit was that they said that rural South Carolina wasn't getting proper funding. Well, the courts saw it that way. So what the state has done now in those predominantly distressed areas, every kid can go to a technical college and get it absolutely paid for. There are some requirements that exist with that, but they're very lenient. You just have to really make good grades, and you can't have a bachelor's degree already. So I do see the government, the big bad government, actually addressing these things, but out of necessity, okay? We're at record levels of unemployment, statewide, nationwide. We hadn't realized these rates since World War II, Korean War. That's where we're at. And that's very exciting, and that's a great thing, but it comes with, I don't want to use the word consequences, that's too strong, but you know, we've got to be ready. So the government, I believe, both on the state and federal level, recognize that. I think they're putting things into place. I would like to have seen that happen. It almost seems like a reaction, though. I would like to see more progressive measures. But the rubber does hit the road, as already stated, in your local government. And I've served as a mayor. I've worked as a county administrator. And locally, so much can be done, and things are happening. To be competitive, you've got to make it happen. And you know, one great thing, I came today because I knew I'd be surrounded by some very bright people, and I hope to take some ideas home with me. But that's some initiatives taking place state and federally.
Yeah, speaking of ideas, I was wondering if Akeem and Stephanie could maybe share some kind of what's working out there, as far since y'all are two of our biggest employers. And
well, you know, I think for us, it was important for us to get the right talent from day one. So we have a very extensive pre-hiring process. So Ready SE is our partner, and we work very closely with them, where we do pre-hire training. There are personality assessments that people will undergo even before they're hired. And I think that that's worked really well to make sure that we are getting the qualified, skilled team members that we need to help us build these cars. I think that that's been a success. Certainly there are challenges as well in the labor force. I think maintenance technicians, it's a difficult profession, it's difficult to find people in that profession, and that's a shortage nationwide. So I think, again, going back to the trades, I think it's important that we teach the workforce of tomorrow that these are good, highly paid careers that you can get involved in. Hakeem, you want to add to that?
Yeah, you said a lot. I don't know if I can add too much. I will say we're in an era of, how many of us are familiar with Yelp? We all are, right? Are you familiar with Yelpification? That's my new word, by the way, so.
Just checking as
Just
the
checking
trademark.
the trademark.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to do that quickly. We are living in a new culture where to acquire talent and retain talent is due to the Yelpification of companies. That means the employee experience once you hire them. And that comes down to several different things. The onboarding process. Secondly, the succession plan to pull through those talent that we may not see as moving fast enough. How do you accelerate their careers faster than we've ever done before? Because there is a work shortage also due to the fact that we have a very high percentage of folks that are retirement eligible, and they're not staying. They're saying, peace. They're moving on. And so how do you do that transfer of knowledge? That's one. And then I do believe that companies have to also adopt similar philosophies like universities, where you have this curriculum that gives you the roadmap to a degree. There should be these curriculums that give you a roadmap for a career. Mm-hmm. Companies has not quite finalized that yet. I don't care what company you work for, even Deloitte, they haven't finalized it. It is the magic bullet to retention. And then there's this thing about competitive pay. Because believe it or not, I remember 20 months ago when I came to the wonderful, charming Low Country, Mount Pleasant didn't look like it has done today. Just the growth. You go downtown, just the growth. Summersville, the growth. Now in Volvo, the growth. So while South Carolina is primed to be the international mecca of manufacturing, there's going to be a war for talent right here, and it's going to come down to pay. Mm-hmm. So how do you balance pay and with benefits? And I'm talking internally and externally. What do you make that attractive? Some folks have got to understand that maybe we don't pay you as much, and when I say we, not Boeing, but just in general, company, may not pay you as much, but what we can give you is other benefits that equates to dollars. So one is around flexible work schedule. Because what we do know as individuals that's entering to the workforce, there's two different types. You've got the individuals who I consider to be green. Green is good. Simply means that you're much more inexperienced, the younger folks, the millennials. And then you have those individuals who I call transitional careers. Those are individuals maybe in their late 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, and they have had some experiences, now they want to do something different. And they're also having competing forces into the workforce. So when they come on board, what are you providing them to deal with their personal lives? Because that's going to be key for retention. So the flexible work schedule is one. If we continue around the growth that we're doing, the infrastructure is going to be a challenge, getting to work on time. which could create labor shortages. So are we thinking about individuals that can work from home? And then third, around the benefits, really pushing, unlike before, I believe, tuition reimbursement. We at the Bowen Company, I tell folks all the time when they come and they talk to me, especially our folks who have gone through some of the SE training and desire to do something else, and I look at them and I go, well, tell me what's your career plan? And when they'll say, well, I'd like to be ABC, ABC could be anything because they decide that. I said, well, you know, that's going to require a bachelor's degree or higher. Where are you in that process? They'll look at me, some have obtained an associate's, which I think is a good mark, some have not. And then I look at them and go, have you looked at the free money we give away? It's free. And so the employer branding around Yelpification, if we can do these things well, we will keep the talent here, grow it, so it can help us grow. But the lack thereof will fall behind. And to be honest with you, what we'll have is an internal imploding, which of course, the talent will then be taken out of here somewhere else, and we want to keep it in South Carolina. So that's my perspective.
Obviously, everybody who's in the room, obviously your businesses have come here, Boeing and Volvo have come here. But Claire, I wonder if you could speak to how the sort of tightening labor market, now that we have unemployment down around, I think, 3% or lower, depending on the month, how's that impacting recruiting of businesses to the Lowcountry, and what are you hearing from people who are interested but not here yet?
Talent, as I said at the beginning, is the number one issue in the conversation that we have with companies. And what we try to talk about is the data that we have that shows what our labor pool is, what are the underemployed, where are the opportunities, and are they going to be competing with the folks here at the table and those that aren't here at the table for talent? How do we address that? I think you've heard a lot of conversation about what we're doing in the community to grow the pipeline so that companies aren't cannibalizing each other, that they're not hopping from one manufacturer to another for 25-cent raises, which does happen. And I'd like to build upon what you were just saying and echo that, because 1 in 4 jobs in the state of South Carolina were created in the Charleston region in the past 10 years. So we are an economic engine for the state. With that tremendous amount of economic momentum comes challenges as a community, affordability across our region, transportation, transit. And we know that while the federal government and our local government leaders are looking at solutions and looking at funding, bus rapid transit will be 10 years away. So what can we do as a community and with the private sector leading it to affect change that makes it sticky to keep your employees and for your supplier companies that need to come in to be near you to have the talent that they need to support you? How do we make Charleston the best Charleston it can be without losing the sense of place, the sense that makes this place special? And so one of the things that I would say is 80% of us drive alone in a car to work every day. We are traffic. So when you talked about flexible things, aside from raises, how can companies create a work environment that offers a competitive advantage and an incentive for employees to stay? I would go back to the article the Post and Courier wrote this week about some of the barriers that women, minorities, and others find in the workplace. If you don't have stable transportation, if you don't have a place that you can afford to live near where you work, you're starting from behind. So look at flex time. Look at staggered start time. Look at incentivizing your employees to take carpools and van pools. If there's a stat, and John, don't quote me because I'm going to mangle it, but it's roughly, if just 4% of us in the region would challenge and change our commute pattern, do something different that would clear an entire lane of all 19 miles of 526. So thinking about what we can do to grow our talent, to make our community better, to preserve the great lifestyle qualities that we have, it starts with each of us individually. What can you do differently? But it also starts with the major employers that are putting people on the roads. What can we do to make that part of the company culture? Because federal and state government help is going to be years away, because you have to plan it and study it and traffic model it and all of those type of things before any pavement is ever done. And what can we do as a region to look at when bus rapid corridors are going to happen? Are there job centers? Are there housing centers at all price points that people can access those transportation nodes? I think what the hospitality community is doing with the Park and Ride is amazing. We need more of that. We need comprehensive looking at our region, because our labor pool is regional. It's not specific to Mount Pleasant, Somerville, Berkeley County. All of those things happen together, and I'm really proud of the folks in this room and the folks at COG that are looking at it as a region, because we got this momentum by working together over many, many years. And I think the solutions that come from making this place continue to be globally competitive and attractive and a model for other communities are still with us working together.
Great. We have a little time left, and I'd like to maybe open it up to the floor for questions.
Thank you. Claire, you mentioned something about what we're doing to cycle people out of poverty. And that's my question: what are we doing? To whether they're wanting to get into, a different kind of work, different kind of life expectancy, quality of life, and choosing a engineering path or whatever else it might be.
So the question is, what is being done to address the cycle of poverty in the region?
Cycling people out of poverty.
There are a lot of different things. The community has a strategy called One Region, and equity and economic equity is a part of that, because if you look at earnings by race, it's very disparate. If you look at education attainment by race, from what Cradle to Career has done, it's disparate. I think Gallup did a study that the zip code you're born into determines not only how much you will earn, but your life expectancy. These are sobering things that we as a community have to work together and to address. And so you have different organizations that are working to get under the hood with those things. I think whether it's, how can a child come to school ready to learn if there hasn't been a stable place for he or her to stay that night, if they're coming to school hungry? If you follow the Maslow's hierarchies of needs, there's no way to get there. So there are organizations in our community working to look at that, the free school lunch program. Greenville does something really interesting where they have a 360 approach for each student. They have a principal, a counselor, a teacher, a nutritionist, to look holistically at the child and kind of a red, yellow, green light system before something becomes a problem to address it. I think that's a very interesting model that Charleston should consider. When you look at it from opening their eyes to what you said, the possibilities of what they could be, programs like Boeing's Dream Learners or Blackbaud's Camp Blackbaud, they're going and getting students at the elementary and middle school age and exposing them to science that is fun, where you're making something, you're doing something. So some of it is just exposure to possibilities that you weren't aware that were out there at a very young age. I don't have a specific, one silver bullet solution, but if you look at the racial disparities report that the College of Charleston published about Charleston and Berkeley County, they do make some specific recommendations of things that cities and others can do to really get at the heart of that problem.
My reason for asking is that I've worked as a missionary and as a nonprofit leader with low-income people for 28 years. And I see these people that we work with, they're bound with a very low glass ceiling. They only can do what they've been exposed to, what their grandmama did, their mama did, and that's what they think they should be doing. And, you know, my work now is to help people in that situation dream a future dream of what their tomorrow could be like. And so I'm just wondering, you know, how we can work all that together.
I'll tell you one small example, and I'm going to try not to cry in front of a room of people when I'm trying to be professional. But when I first learned about the Youth Apprenticeship Program, I was taking a group of international journalists to learn about the program. Hopefully they would go back and write about it and publicize what our community is doing. And we were at Vought Airlines, and there was a young man, and he was basically talking about no one in his family for generations had gone to college. He was the first one to graduate high school. And that his dream, and this was a stretch dream, was to get the skills and training to become a welder. That was going to be transformational in his family. And through this youth apprenticeship program and exposure at Vought, he learned about Clemson, he learned about engineering, and the Vought is paying for him to go to Clemson to study mechanical engineering. And it is absolutely transforming an entire family's economic cycle. And just hearing it, I had chills. I was kind of getting a tear away. I didn't want anybody to see, but I mean, it's magical. And so I think, to your point, so much of it and what we're trying to do is tell the stories of what these companies are doing and how do we get to those populations that need to hear it the most. And it can't just be a marketing organization. It has to be peer communication, what the paper does to highlight it as well. It's going to take all of us to make sure that those most vulnerable are aware of it. But then do they have the transportation to be able to get there? All of the things that address the cycle of poverty.
That's very good to hear. One other question is I work with the town of Mount Pleasant with affordable housing. And recently we had a chamber member come and say, you know, we're not really having a housing crisis. What we're having is a talent crisis. And they cited doctors who've moved here, just like what you were saying. They've moved here and they have to locate outside of Charleston, Goose Creek, Somerville, wherever. And when they have to make it to the hospital, you know, it's such a long commute, and they can't get there on time, and a lot of them are moving away. So I think the transportation issue is a huge thing, and the affordability of housing too.
Can I add to your comment right quick, because this is something we experienced in rural South Carolina. We have an alliance, a clergy alliance. I think clergy really plays a role in getting the word out. You have access to so many folks, and so we really utilize that. Industrial parks are great, mainly established for the infrastructure to attract folks, but it's also good from a transportation piece. The state did allocate some funds last year, and we utilized it in our area where they paid for transportation. We had a bus to pick up in certain strategic routes, and they would take them to work to some of our big employers like Harbor Freight. But that was to encourage the private business, getting back on that, to invest in it after the fact. And that's where we're at to see if private businesses invest in this. But I do believe clergy plays more of a role than people realize in getting information out to the public and just motivating kids.
I'd like to add to that a little bit, because I think you've hit something there that struck a chord in me. You know, I always tell people the power that any of us can have is knowledge. That's the key, knowledge. Once you have knowledge, then it has to be exposure. Then once you get the exposure, then you must have an opportunity, someone taking a chance. And you know, I heard your story around, I'm going to use the word, or dare I say, how do you break through the dysfunctional generational curse? And it goes beyond the clergy, and I do agree that they play a role. It goes beyond what our government can do. It's really about us being involved. Each of us have a story to tell, and I'm not going to go into my story, but what you talked about actually reflected a little bit of my story, background. Mom, probably maybe four years education. Single parent, struggled with 4 boys. It was pretty intense. But I'll tell you, if we can plant a seed in one, it can multiply as disciples, and we can literally change the world. It's not going to happen overnight, because some of the things that we think about is we're wanting quick results, because we're in a country where everything is quick. But something has to be planted as seed, bear fruit, and with that fruit then comes the next generation of different fruits. I'm one of them. And so I share with you that mentorship is really important for families who are disenfranchised, who are experiencing what I would consider the disparity that you talked about. Because through mentorship, you can then plant a seed. Telling your story with these individuals gives them hope. When individuals sit across from me in my office and tell me their stories, then I share with them my story. And they look at me and go, my goodness, you are the executive HR site leader of Boeing, South Carolina. The perception is you must have came up privileged. It's just the total opposite. So now it's my moral opportunity to give back. That's where we lack. And that goes across all race and gender. You gotta give back. Because with that partnership with that guy over there around the philanthropic work comes exposure. So how is it a young African-American male who may not see the art of the possibility see where I am and say, I aspire to be like that guy? And then secondly, the community service is great, but we have to co-join with the community. And again, show up. Even if they don't show up, show up. Because if you change one, that one could be the next Oprah. That one could be the next Maya Angelou. That one could be the next Barack Obama. That one could be the next Akeem Iman Jones. You just never know. And so I want to share that because we don't do that enough. Some of us get to the hill or the mountain or get to the east side, finally got a piece of the pie, moving on up. The Jeffersons, that's right. But we forgot where we came from and how powerful our stories will not only change others' lives, but it changes a generation. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. And by the way, let's make sure we connect, because I'd like to partner with you, okay?
Well said.
Good morning. My name is Thomas Heath. First of all, thank you, John, Thad, and Mitch for putting this together. It's been a fascinating discussion. So, among other things, I create content on LinkedIn, and I'm writing an article about this. So, Claire, first, I love what you said, that we don't have a labor shortage, we have an alignment issue, and I believe in that. Akeem, my question's for you. So, I quoted you saying we have to do a better job of branding, and I agree with you. Specifically, what are your thoughts? What are the panel's thoughts? If there's a need for businesses to create successful internship programs and mentoring programs, in other words, we're not doing a good job of it, who can help train businesses on like what you're doing at Boeing? You know, what exists either in the CRDA or the chamber to go to employers and say, we're going to teach you how to build a successful mentoring program. We're going to teach you how to handle interns. What are your thoughts on that?
And you chose me, huh?
Yeah, pressure's on, dude.
All right. The Chamber of Commerce, I've had the opportunity of, in Columbia, South Carolina, a couple months ago to actually speak to a group of university presidents. And what I shared with them is there is a need for a co-creation and partnership, and we must step outside of ourselves and start thinking differently. The world is changing, and not only is it changing, technology we cannot even keep up with. But even with all of that, the missing link is emotional quotient. That's the missing link, how we get along, how do we collaborate and work together. So as a result of what you're talking about, I've actually had the opportunity of forming an alliance with some of the local HR folks in their organizations. We get together once a quarter, and we actually do crosstalks. We do best sharing practices. We haven't really, I would say, knock it out the ballpark yet, so I'll be more than happy to connect with you afterwards and see how we can make this bigger, because I think the vision you're talking about is how do we get this out further. And in this group, we really talk about what are we doing without any kind of proprietary information sharing, but what are we doing in the space of talent? What's working in your space, what's not? When we talk about internships, what is the metrics that shows when you have these interns that come year after year, what does the ROI is, you convert them to your badge, we call it the blue badge, but to become an employee. If that's not happening, you're making an investment and you're not seeing your return. Better yet, let's spread it much larger. If I don't have the opportunity for that guy or that young lady, maybe my connection with Volvo is to say, hey, this person interned with me for 4 years, we don't have an opportunity, but guess what? You cannot let this talent leave South Carolina. That's the lack of where we are today. That is the key, the silver bullet that's going to take us to the next level. Because this is not just about Boeing. This is not just about Volvo. This is about South Carolina. And how we work together and collaborate in this space can take us to the next level.
Yeah, and I just would add, I think networking is really important, to his point. I think that businesses need to come together. It is not about proprietary information, but it is about a joint effort on a need that we have. And, you know, I know certainly Volvo is open to partnering with some of you guys. If you need advice, we can talk about, you know, what's working with you and what's working with us. So I think that collaboration among the businesses is really key.
CRDA, part of what our mission is to attract talent, entrepreneurs, obviously businesses to the community. And what we've found is that through the gap that is here, we really need mid to senior level tech talent. So about 3-4 years ago, we launched a tech talent branding campaign called Charleston Open Source. And what's interesting is that that name was a play on words about open source technology, but it was also about the fact that the tech community in Charleston is extremely open and collaborative. And so that is HR professionals getting together, sharing ideas, and oftentimes sharing talent. Because what they find is that for a mid-senior level professional, if you're relocating a family, you're doing your due diligence. You want to know that if I get to this location, what are the schools like? If it doesn't work out for me and you, could it work out for you and me? And so we have actually had, through the Tech Talent campaign, where the firms are actually setting up appointments for a prospect that they're trying to attract with other tech companies in the community, because they'd rather they stay here than if they don't come to them, they can go somewhere else. So I find that interesting and fascinating, and from what I've heard, that is very unusual. And unusual to Charleston. And some of these folks have been in Seattle, Boston, working for Microsoft and others, and they're like, yeah, that's not happening. But I think it's part of Charleston's magic and the specialness of it. So as much as we can be ambassadors for this community, for the opportunities that are here, and shine a light on other programs that are happening to lift people up. Even if it's not a program your organization is specifically involved in, talk to your comms people about sharing it and why it's important to share it, and frankly, why not get involved in it and support it if you can.
With that said, and I agree with both of my colleagues here, I think where we can get your help, we need to go on an advertising campaign. Some of the great activities and work that's being done behind the scenes in many different sectors, how do we get this message out? Because the more we share our stories, we won't get on Twitter, but the more we share our stories, the better we get the traction that we need. And not only that, getting other business just as excited to be a part of this movement. So, you know, it goes beyond, I think, a communication strategy. It's truly a marketing, advertising strategy. And better yet, having those individuals who have been a part of that movement to tell their stories as testimonies, powerful. Those video vignettes that can really talk about what's happening in Charleston. Just imagine if you saw a commercial that talked about, hey, I was a part of this particular cohort of group, and this is what it did for me, this is how it changed my life, why Charleston is a place for you to be. Can you imagine that? That's where we need to go.
I think we have time for one more.
My name is Maxine Gatson. I'm an HR director at Palmetto Community Action Partnership, DBA Charleston County Human Services. We service 3 counties, Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester. A lot of people think that what we do is just pay bills, but we do link up with other companies, which we are trying with Volvo, Mercedes, and Boeing, but we're being unsuccessful. So, and we have to also look at that the new, how we would say it, we look at the homeless situation. We have people come in and get assistance, but it's the new homeless. In other words, if you used to be middle class, now you're lower class. If you used to be wealthy, now you're middle class. But the problem we're having, and we're talking about retaining and attracting, what about re-educating those who have lost their jobs, but they cannot find jobs? So yes, we are growing, but guess what? We still have those who are not documented. Once they get all the unemployment, that's it. And it's not how it used to be. After 12 weeks, and then that is cut. So now it comes to, we're looking at high schoolers. We're looking at college people. But what about the adults who have been in the workforce, but they can't find employment? And how do we train them, even if they already have degrees or have years of experience? I think this is a great panel. I love it. I might have to take it into my regional. I'm thinking about how I'm gonna make connections here. But this is something we need to talk about. It's great that we're educating our college students. We have to. I like the fact that you talked about the 30 degrees being started here. I didn't know about that. You're telling me about the Dream Learners program. Did not know about that. I'm listening to a lot of things that you're talking about, but one thing I do believe, I agree with you on, yes, we get applicants. I get applicants, but when it comes to drug testing, they can't pass it. Then when it comes to readiness, the application says one thing. When we're interviewing them, it's something totally different. So how can, to sum it all up, how can we impact the adults who have, working adults for years, already have degrees, some don't have degrees. How can we help those individuals? Because that's the only way we're going to build the economy. If you're already unemployed, don't have a place to stay.
So I think you've said a lot that cannot be accomplished, being that that's the last question. But what I would like to share with you is I do believe we probably need to connect and have a dialogue. And it's not just me. I think having a dialogue with the business community. One of my biggest concerns is, how do people reinvent themselves when they have fallen short and things have just happened to them? Sometimes not by their own activity, it just happens. And then you layer into there the social issues around what I like to use as a mental disorder, whether it's an addiction that leads to can't pass the drug test, and it goes on and on and on. It's much deeper than just the surface. So I think you've invoked something in me about how can I, if nothing else, even just having a dialogue about, let's really do a SWOT analysis and think of what are the opportunities in that space that's now creating that threat, to minimize that, mitigate that. Because I think partnership with the government, partnership with our community, and partnership with you, we can come up with a solution. Now, the key is education, and I'm not talking about a degree. I'm talking about the power that I talked about, the knowledge. These folks that you're talking about that are kind of left behind need that mentorship. They also need the exposure for readiness and the opportunity. So this, and transportation. So this is where it comes into play. They may look good on paper, but if they can't eloquently speak in an interview to present themselves well, they're not moving forward. So who's preparing them for that? By the way, it's not a college, because our college students don't do that well either, just to be honest with you. But building the network and the mentorship and the sponsorship where someone behind the scenes can say, while you may not see everything in this person, they have the ability, and we are going to give them that opportunity and take the chance, that's where you move the needle. And so that's where we need to get to. So for example, there may not be an opportunity at Boeing. Boeing may not be for them. Maybe it's a Volvo, maybe it's somewhere else. But I think we can make some incremental change in that space in partnership together.
Let's give our panel a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. We're going to have a short video here in just a second, but I wanted to get up and say thank you. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Clemson, for sponsoring today's event. We really appreciate it, and I hope you all got a lot out of this. If you have feedback for us after the program, please let us know. We're always looking to improve. We're going to be doing more of these. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you again, Clemson.